or afternoon for you guys. I'm good. Thanks.
Fist bump in advance.
Oh, hey. Put some style on it.
Yeah, I was thinking as we're looking at the panelists that 3 of you are former students and you're all brighter, better looking, have more friends and a brighter future than me. I'm so pleased to have you.
Oh, come on.
I think the rule is nice to your students. You never know when they'll give you a job. Hello, Wendell. How are you? It's good to see you, Wendell.
Blake, is that better? You don't see the things on the bottom anymore? Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Okay.
Welcome, Wendell. Welcome, Malika and Blake and Bill.
Hi.
Stefan. Hey, Wendell.
Stefan.
Hi, how are you?
Guten Tag, wie geht's?
Danke, gut.
They're good. You look wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a while.
Yeah, how are all my friends in the Stuttgart office?
All good. Mostly at home.
Hopefully we won't forsake those things when we're allowed to travel and breathe the same air again.
And gang, we're about 1 minute to start time, so we'll wait for our attendees to kind of sign on here and probably give it about a minute past 1, and then I'll start with introductions.
Hey, I have one real quick question just about how this works. Not
Sure,
having
Kevin.
given a lecture where I didn't advance the slides. Will we see the time at the same time as the slides, or no? Like,
No, yeah, it'll just go automatically at 20 seconds a slide.
okay.
It's like a dance marathon, Kevin. You go till they tap you on the shoulder.
Yeah.
And should we all mute until we're speaking?
Yeah, unless you're up, yeah, that would be great if you could go ahead and mute.
Not you, Wendell, though. I want you to give a running commentary over my stuff because it'll be more interesting.
Someone that just signed in from Portugal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I see that from Lisbon. Cesar.
So I see the numbers are ticking up here in terms of participants. So we'll give it a little bit longer since the official start just came at 1. So we'll wait a minute or 2 as people start logging on.
So can they see all of our banter right now, which is really fun?
They can. And that's perfectly fine.
Enjoy.
We're all humans trying to figure this thing out.
They're all John's students. He's made this.
Exactly. Yes.
Go. They're all going to be grading me.
Let me ask another silly question since I've never done this before. So when we're speaking, should we stop our video so that it doesn't, I mean, will our slides be interrupted by speaking?
No, your slide will be the main thing on the screen, and then your head will just kind of be off to the side.
Okay.
So there'll be a small interruption of the field with your view, but the main thing people will be seeing is the slide deck. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. If I can ask the panelists to go ahead and mute, I'll go ahead and say welcome to everyone that's signing in. It looks like from around the world, so thank you for joining us today for our mini symposium, which we've entitled New Conceptions, Sustainable Organic Architecture. I'm Justin Gunther. I'm the director at Fallingwater and a vice president of the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. And we're so pleased to collaborate on this mini symposium with Miami University. Fallingwater, as the masterpiece of Frank Lloyd Wright's philosophy of organic architecture, serves as a perfect foundation for today's discussions. In designing Fallingwater, Wright sought a harmonious relationship between human habitation and the natural world. He sought an architecture that would strengthen people's understanding of the landscapes around them. And he accomplished this by rooting the design in nature's forms and principles, by focusing on the connection between interior and exterior. and by using volumes and contrasts like light and dark, compression and expansion, to take the occupant through spaces as if on a journey through nature. And our purpose today is to explore these fundamentals of Wright and of Fallingwater, to view these ideas through a contemporary lens as a starting point for sustainable design today. Our speakers for today are practicing architects, academics, students, and scholars. So you'll hear from a range of perspectives. But before we get underway with the proceedings today, I just want to go over a few logistics for the audience and give you an outline of today's mini symposium. You'll first hear some keynote remarks from Stefan Banish, who's joining us from Stuttgart. And once Stefan's remarks are finished, we'll follow that with a Pachacacha presentation from our 6 additional speakers. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with Pachacacha, each speaker has a total of 20 slides, and those slides advance automatically every 20 seconds. So it's kind of a fun, rapid format, helps to create some spontaneity, but also some synergy between the different speakers. And then finally, we'll close with some summary comments from each of the speakers. And if we have time at the end, certainly open it up to a Q&A. So if you do have questions throughout the presentation, go ahead and add those in the chat or the Q&A. I'll try and follow those. And if we have time at the end, we'll open the floor for some questions and answers from our speakers. So now I'd like to introduce you to John Reynolds, the co-organizer for today's mini symposium. And I've had the great honor to work with John on many projects at Fallingwater over the years. John is a registered architect and a professor of architecture at Miami University, where he has received numerous teaching awards. He teaches courses in landscape and urban design, contemporary European architectural theory and practice, graphic media, modern vernacular architecture, and also leads architectural design studios. His research focuses on contemporary European architectural theory, architectural sustainability, organic architecture, new approaches to the Froebel method, and modern vernacular architecture. His design, research, and design build projects for Fallingwater, for the Westcott House, among others, have been exhibited and published internationally. And John was contributing author to 2 books, The Nature of Circumstance and Fallingwater, both published by Rizzoli. Prior to joining Miami, Professor Reynolds pursued architectural practice with 2 internationally recognized firms, Eisenman Robertson Architects in New York and Charlottesville, and Tigerman McCurry Architects in Chicago, Illinois. So John, I'll turn things over to you to make some additional introductions.
Thanks, Justin, and good afternoon to everyone. As we begin our presentations today, of course, I'd like to thank Justin and Fallingwater for this opportunity, as well as Miami University College of Creative Arts Dean Liz Mullinex and Associate Dean John Wigan for their support and interest in this symposium, and of course, to my department chair, Mary Rajero, who's joining us, for her support and participation. And to Stefan and our panelists, my heartfelt thanks. And that's as well for your many years of collegiality and friendship. And now I'd like to offer a brief overview of today's mini symposium. The New Conceptions of Sustainable Organic Architecture mini symposium seeks to advance theories and practices that explore the terrain of sustainability through the lens of what might be called organic. For Frank Lloyd Wright, the term organic was a multifaceted construct that underpinned democratic values and evolved during his life's work. Part to whole integration, building site relation, formal and functional attributes and relationships, humankind's relation to nature, among others, were of import to Wright's conception of organic architecture. Sustainability, like the term organic, while aimed at maintaining the Earth's viability over the long term, also has many dimensions: cultural, social, economic, as well as the psychological and spiritual dimensions of human well-being. The purpose of this mini symposium is to explore sustainable constructs through the lens of the organic, to advance more comprehensive and effective theories and practices that will secure a vital and enduring future for our planet, while envisioning a built environment that nurtures and ennobles the human condition. And now it's with great pleasure that I introduce our mini keynote speaker, Stefan Banish, who joins us from Stuttgart. Stefan is the founding partner of Banish Architekten. Stefan studied philosophy and economics in Munich and architecture in Karlsruhe. Prior to establishing his own practice in 1989, he worked as an architect at Banish & Partner, the distinguished practice run by his father, Professor Günther Banish. Stefan's firm, Banish Architekten, became independent in 1991 and established a global reputation for developing innovative, sustainable buildings. Stefan has taught at several institutions as a visiting professor, among them Yale, Penn, UVA, the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, the University of New Mexico, and TU Delft. Among his many awards, Stefan received a Global Award for Sustainable Architecture, a Good Design Award in the category People presented by the Chicago Athenaeum and European Center for Architecture, Art, Design, and Urban Studies, and the Energy Performance and Architecture Award. Stefan was also a Miami University Maxfield lecturer. So with great pleasure, I give you Stefan Banish. Stefan.
John, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to speak here. And thank you for inviting me. I have prepared something. It's not an easy topic for me because the understanding from the expressionist architecture here in Europe of organic architecture is a little bit different from the American understanding of organic architecture. But I think, I hope I managed to give some ideas of our mutual understanding here. I took the liberty to showcase here a non-built building, a building that is right now in design. We just started a few months ago for a client, well-known client, who asked us to do a CO2 neutral building, but in a lifespan, including materials and everything. So a real CO2 neutral building. Next, please. First of all, I would like just to remind everybody of the challenges we have here. As we see, our buildings are actually one of the biggest problems we have. And since 2/3 of our building stock are pretty old, it is a challenge for all new buildings to really compensate that, considering that at 2050, we all want to be CO2 neutral in our cities. And actually, some countries want to achieve that by 2030, which is 10 years from now. Considering constructing a building designing and constructing takes 5 years, we have to speed up. Next one, please. Very simple. When we look at materials, Stuttgart-Los Angeles round trip is 4.8 tons CO2. Economy class, first class, double it. 100 square meters of concrete floor ceiling, 1 foot thick, is 15 tons of CO2. That means 3 round trips, Los Angeles, 100 square meters. So building materials are a real problem. Next one, please. Sustainable considerations. We tried in our office to categorize, to find a narrative. How do we approach and explain our clients what can we do and how do we approach sustainability? And to be very honest, the most important one is the one I will focus today on. It's the passive design. It is the part where with architecture, with design, we have the biggest impact. And only where this fails, we come to engineering systems, to energy resources, and so on. Passive design, user behavior are the main influences in sustainable design. Thank you. Next one, please. And now comes a very interesting thing. Especially here in Germany, we discuss it right now. Today and in the past, we all focus, we perceive sustainability very quantitative over here. Kilowatt hours per square meter per year. Considering our today's energy mix, it's very important that we minimize the use of the energy in a building, yeah, to minimize it. But let's assume we really have all renewable and have clean energy. Suddenly, this doesn't become the main problem anymore. Suddenly, the main problem on buildings is the emissions of materials, the gray energy in buildings. Yeah, that suddenly becomes more of an issue than heating, cooling, lighting, if we assume we can have CO2 neutral energy. Right now in Germany, we have renewables in summer already at 80% of our electricity demand, and in the year average, we are a little bit above 40%. So suddenly, it's very important how we construct the buildings. Next one, please. So where are influences or where, when we have a more holistic approach to sustainability and not only a quantitative approach, we have the urban context, the public realm, the qualitative. Considering that architecture are very prominent, the most prominent human artifacts, they place or they define us, place and time. Yeah? Think about Paris, New York, Rome, and so on. Then the cultural context is important, the material responsibility, the reuse of valuable resources, and so on, the gardens, the green. And only the last three ones, which is climate, natural daylight, and artificial lighting, they are the quantitative aspects. And these are the ones we totally focus on. And all the other ones we tend to forget or ignore. Yeah. So our focus is too narrow. Yeah, we have tunnel vision when we discuss sustainability today. Next one, please. And now I would like to show you on a on a designed building or a building in design process, sustainability, our approach to sustainability. It's supposed to be a CO2 neutral building. And the client said, because it's a school and it's a community center, sports, kindergarten, and so on, it's a very multifunctional building. They said, wouldn't it be great if you see the change of seasons at the building? That means people have a sweater in winter, a t-shirt in summer. Buildings are all the same, summer and winter. Sometimes sun shading goes down, end of story. Wouldn't it be good to develop a building that actually changes over the seasons, its appearance, and has different functions? Next one, please. And this is the floor plan. And we approached it in a way, in an additive way. It's almost a little bit back 80s decon in the appearance. The theory here was, our architectural approach was, each element should fulfill perfectly its own purpose and has the appropriate form. And they come together in the middle. At the outside, they are light. It's all wooden structure. And in the inside, the rounded elements you see there, they are heavy. They are out of clay, rammed earth. So they have thermal qualities. They are activated. They have qualities for moisture, yeah, humidity in the room, and so on. That means the center is heavy, the outside is wooden, is light, and reacts. And this is how the building functions. I'll come to that. And the rounded elements are the special rooms. It's kitchen, it's shop, it's cafeteria, It's a maker space, it's a music space, it's a recording studio in different floors, these rounded elements. And what they call the holodecks, the flat elements, the school, the kindergarten, fitness, sports hall, they are very open spaces that can be adapted, changed, and so on. Next one, please. And here you see it in a model. The idea is also in summer, it's all open, the wind can come through, it's an all open space, and in winter we can close the facades. Next one. So the ground floor is the kindergarten, the cafe, the food spot, sports, maker space, fitness, all this kind of stuff. As you see, it's a very multifunctional building. And in the middle, we have what we call the agora. It's a space where people come together. We have a stage there. We can open the sports hall to it. We can open the multifunctional room. It's in the northeastern corner, the multifunctional room between make and food. We can open all this to the agora. And one crucial element of the building was it's inclusive. The client said they want everybody who goes to that school, disabled people or physically challenged people, to reach all elements of the building the exactly same way everybody else reaches them. So the agora is a ramped space. We have a spiral ramp in there, which is also sort of the balcony when you have events, theater, and things like that in the center. Next one, please. We work here together with Bartenbach, Lichtlabor, Transolar, and Knipper-Hellwig Engineering for facade and the wooden structure. And Bartenbach gave us also an idea that in the north, you want warmer materials, you want matte diffuse materials, you want softer materials, more earthy, yellowish, brownish, and to the south, you want shiny, cooler materials to the south exposed area and colder colors to make the space more comfortable and compensate for the different light qualities. Next one. And this is a rendering from the inside. So the outside floor goes through, the facades can be opened, and you see here the clay elements, the activated clay buildings in there. And to the right is the stair, but to the left, this is all ramps going up. So you have one shortcut stair, but all the others is a spiral going up to 3 levels in the building. It's a pure wooden structure, full wooden structure. There is no concrete. The only metal is one column to the right. The wood would be just too fat, but all the other is wood and clay, ramped earth. Next one, please. And here you see one upper floor. As you see, it's these loft spaces, these very open floor plans that allow to use these spaces in many different ways. The idea is to have no classroom schools, but to have schools, it's a middle school, would be your junior high school probably, that all children from all grades are in one big room and do project learning in different areas and spaces in there. Next one, please. Now we go to one floor up, the community hub. It's for the community, music lab, school, health, kindergarten. And they also rent up spaces for startups. So the pupils that are finished there, they can rent spaces and create their own startups and so on. It's a philanthropic school. They create for the neighborhood this hub. And right now we are adding half a floor because they want also a multi-generational meeting there. That means elderly people take care of the children in kindergarten, and the children in kindergarten communicate with the elders. You would call it senior citizens probably, with the elderly people there. And so it's really a very integrated program, which I think for an experimental project like that, it's beautiful to have it. Next one, please. Here you see a model of the next floor. You see the ramp in the middle, how it's up. And the agora will be the heart, the soul of the whole building, the center where they meet. They all come in the morning, they meet, they have their events there, and then they go to their separate spaces in the building. Next. They have robotic at the school, the digital school, and there they have also these startups in there. So it's really a multifaceted program. The next, please. And here the roof. The roof is an element that all ties it together again. Yeah, the whole thing ties it together. It is about 120,000 square feet. So it's not a small building. It's a rather large building. No basement. We didn't want to use a basement because moving earth is energy and we don't need it here. We have geothermal. Next one, please. I'll explain that. The roof, south-facing roof is photovoltaic shingles. To the right bottom, that's my house. That's where I am right now. It's photovoltaic shingles enough to run the whole building, including all plug loads. Yeah. So next one. And now comes an interesting part, the facades. We said the facades should be different to all different directions. We want to change the facade over the seasons, but we didn't want the lamellas or sun shading going up and down in summer. It should be always open, but should be well shaded. So we have 4 facade types. Next one. And here are they. It's an all wooden structure with a light shelf on the top. The lamellas keep the direct sun out. And you see northeast, northwest, we have the verticals, and southeast, southwest to block out the sun when it moves. And the light shelf and the lamellas block out the sun from above. This is the summer situation, the winter situation now. Next one. You don't hardly see there is a foil, a clear, for the time being ETFE, but we are looking for something better there. A clear foil over the facade, so the insulation value of the facade becomes better. And also it works like a Trump wall, so we can get preheated air, solar preheated air in the building. It's in the room. We'll show it on the next one. Next one. Here you see it. Left summer, there it's open. In winter, the foil goes down. We get preheated air in the spaces in the room. Transsolar did calculation, and in a sunny winter day, that's almost enough to heat the spaces behind it. So we save a lot of heating energy, and all the rest is provided by geothermal. Cooling is only geothermal. It's Hamburg. We don't need much cooling. But cooling is only provided by free flow geothermal without heat pump. And in winter, we need some heat pump. Next one. And here is the concept. It's an mostly passive concept. So it's natural ventilation, it's an earth duct, it's geothermal, and we work with the lee and loof of the wind to have a natural ventilation. We have a big greenhouse on the roof to bring preheated air also in winter in the building, and in summer also pre-cooled air in the building. And the agora is generally the breathing apparatus. It's the air return of the whole building. Next one, please. And here, what you see at the bottom, it's actually quite interesting. It is a clay, precast clay plate where we have tubes through, and then it's plastered over it. So you have an activated ceiling or walls, pure clay. So you have a very good humidity situation, but you have it activated. And to the right, we are right now experimenting with textile heating, which is a special textile where you get warm water through. And you can use it like curtains and things. Yeah, curtains, it's a fabric. And that helps you heating and works also acoustically. So there is no tubing in the floor. There's only the tubing in the active clay ceilings. And the rest is curtains for the heating in winter, additional heating in winter through the curtains. And yeah, next one, please. The wooden structure is, we did, Knippers Helwig did a calculation. Right now, there is a new wooden system developed by the University of Rosenheim, which is almost like a concrete ceiling. To the right, it has a steel head and top, and you can have a flat CLT wooden ceiling without any beams and anything. And the dimensions are not thicker than any concrete ceiling. Yeah, just the column is a little bit thicker for pure fire protection. That's the only reason why it's thicker. But the ceiling itself is not thicker than concrete. And when you look at the numbers, we have at concrete 1,000 tons for the building, 1,000 tons CO2 emission. With the wood, we get a credit of 1,000 tons for the building. But once the building gets demolished and the wood gets burned or not reused, then we lose the credit again. So it's a zero, more or less. We have to look into preparing it and so on. But generally, we have an advantage of 1,000 tons of CO2 when we go to wood instead of concrete. Next one, please. And this is my final slide. This is the building as it stands right now. We are in a little bit further, we are in an early DD design phase. They want to start construction in end of 21, end of this year, or beginning of next year. And since it's a wooden construction, they assume they can build the whole building, or we assume we can build the whole building in a little bit more than 1 year. And that would be right now the first all-inclusive, inclusive material, CO2 neutral building we design. But the CO2 neutral works only over a span of 20 years when we have an excess of energy, because even a wooden structure uses some energy. Yeah, thank you very much for your time. I hope I was able to explain a little bit our approach here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan, for such an erudite project. Really remarkable, both technically as well as the many dimensions of sustainability that you were alluding to and part of our objective for the symposium. I also have to say, I felt a little bit of Sharon. I think of Lunin, and I think of even some of the Philharmonie, and I mean that with great respect, as that was as quite an emotive experience. Beautiful project. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our first panelist is Kevin Alter, and Kevin is a graduate of Bennington College and Harvard University. He's currently the Richardson Centennial Professor of Architecture at the University of Texas at Austin. And I've had the pleasure of working with Kevin in such a setting. And he served as the Academic Director for Architecture Programs and the Associate Dean for Graduate Programs 2001-14. His firm, Alter Studio, has received more than 100 design awards, among them multiple prestigious national AIA awards in architecture, interior architecture, firm achievement, and housing, among numerous others. An avid curator, symposia organizer, and prolific scholar, Kevin has edited 12 books, and his work was featured in Alter Studio Architecture, 6 Houses, published by Miami University. Kevin is also Miami University Maxfield Lecturer. Welcome, Kevin.
Unmute. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So how does this start? Do I somehow start it, or there we go. Okay. Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Justin. It is a pleasure to be speaking in concert with Fallingwater and amongst a group of architects whose work I really greatly admire. And of course, to reconsider Frank Lloyd Wright's organic architecture as a way to posit a sustainable future. For me, I've always been more interested in understanding Wright's organic architecture with respect to a building's integration into a site and our subsequent relationship to place than in providing ordering systems rooted in nature's forms and geometries, an interpretation which often overshadows Wright's more compelling conception of the term organic. Similarly, I have always been interested in prompting an integrated approach towards sustainability that focuses on orientation to shade, breeze, and engaging specific place, for example, more than on relying solely on employing technology to lower a building's carbon footprint, for example. This latter inclination also tends to eclipse the identity of the term sustainability, and expressing technology all too often serves as an aesthetic guide. In contrast, I would argue that the first and perhaps most important element in building sustainable architecture is desire. A love of a specific place, for example, will inevitably foster its creative and continued use and reuse, regardless of developments in new technology. Here, Frank Lloyd Wright's organic architecture provides a poignant touchstone for the future. Like his often referenced dictate, no house should ever be on a hill or on anything. It should be of the hill, belonging to it. Hill and house should live together, each the happier for the other. Wright wasn't proposing buildings based on the forms of the natural world. Rather, he was designing buildings to be part of the world so that our lives could thrive sympathetically with the built world and the surrounding landscape. Wright saw the means by which we could use architecture's influence to improve the built environment. For me, Wright's touchstone here shifts the paradigm from a focus on the artifact of building and its articulation to conceiving of a building more like an artist's primed canvas, to emphasize and embrace the vicissitudes of circumstance, environment, and social occasion. In this light, we conceive of our work as part of what Frank Lloyd Wright might have deemed a sustainable ecosystem, one in which each component of the natural world, the built environment, and human life supports the other components and thrives as a consequence. We approach each project in the way one might when starting an addition to an extant building, highlighting what is already positive, suppressing what is problematic, and perhaps most interestingly, seeking out what might be latent, there, but not quite evident. Sometimes, when we're lucky, we begin with a kind of stunning situation. And then, like in this house, and then our principal efforts lay in highlighting and engaging what is special about such a circumstance. Here in the Lakeview residence, the visitor begins with meandering through a grove of ancient oaks, and the house intertwines with those oaks. And then that subsequently gives way to a stunning view, and the house mediates between these two different conditions, presenting and highlighting the special qualities of each and contrasting the respective characters through an invitation to live in both worlds simultaneously. The immensity of the view contrasted with the intimacy of the trees and the succulents and things like that. At other times, we find ourselves in a, shall we say, a more compromised condition and have to refocus our attention. In the tight central city lot of the Alta Vista residence, for example, we employed an architecture to shield from the encroaching neighbors that create, shield from the encroaching neighbors and to create a prime canvas that I spoke about before and a selective backdrop to what was most beautiful in this place. creating an oasis-like refuge without turning its back on the unruliness of the neighborhood, and in so doing, representing an overlooked but magnificent oak as the building's face and engaging a similarly magnificent one to define the interior's character. And while sometimes we use circumstance to literally embrace what we found, as we did here with this stunning live oak penetrating the defining roof plane of our Constant Springs residence and joining the interior of the home, creating very much the character of it, we might also adjust the grade to effortlessly levitate the visitor into the adjacent tree canopy and add another unexpected opening in the roof to highlight the presence of the sky, or sculpt the rain into a figure inside the confines of this house. It is extraordinary to be here in a thunderstorm and to feel the rain coming through the middle of the house. Similarly, in our Cuernavaca residence, the architecture is organized to embrace and augment the latent potential of a previously neglected landscape. Great effort was made to simultaneously frame the most compelling qualities of the place, redefining and amplifying the many layers of this very interesting landscape. And in so doing, introducing new layers so that the distant cliffs might be seen against a manicured foreground and the sky pulled into the composition, captured here in a reflecting pool. And at the same time, we try to provide a kind of carefully crafted points of stasis against the omnipresent pull of the out of doors. In contrast, on a property without any significant natural features or trees and neighbors looming on either side, our Highland Park residence establishes an extraordinary new landscape into which the house is entwined and the underlying possibilities of place take precedence. Light and reflection, ground and sky, shadow and texture, figure and frame, here are discovered anew. A series of expectations are created from the outset through the intertwining of architecture and landscape, and unanticipated spaces unfold as the visitor meanders through the property. Into that hovering volume, an unexpected hole is carved, clad abstractly in back-painted glass. It reflects and frames the figure of this really lovely and delicate cedar elm as it reaches towards the light, and it represents it in a new light altogether. And the unadorned stone bar bends to provide a private setting and more poignantly frame the extraordinary Texas sky, which brings me back to the sustainable ecosystem of the built environment supporting and being supported by the natural world and the social occasions of living.
Evan, thank you for such a lyrical and poetic presentation. And I must say, I was thinking about A.E. Bai's wonderful moods in the landscape as I was looking at those tremendous images. And I thank you for them. And I think one of the happiest writing assignments that I've had is to write for 6 houses. So thank you, Kevin, for this amazing presentation. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Our next presenter is Bill James. And Bill is a graduate of Miami University and the University of Michigan. Bill's practiced with Boland Sawinski Jackson for over 9 years. And Bill's worked on a range of award-winning residential and institutional projects, including the High Meadow residence and studio at Fallingwater. His work also includes his continuing collaboration with the Frank Lloyd Wright designed Westcott House in Springfield, Ohio, on the design of an education and visitor pavilion. A proponent of mentorship and continuing education opportunities, Bill has helped lead hands-on design build studios in conjunction with Miami University at both the Westcott House and Fallingwater. Welcome, Bill.
Thanks so much, John. Thank you, Justin, for having me here today. I'm excited to be part of this and such a great cohort of people. As we look at sustainability today, I'd like to do so with an eye to 3 organic patterns, or what we in our practice call natures: the nature of people, the nature of place, and the nature of making, and exploring them in the context of a case study, High Meadow Dwellings and Studio at Fallingwater. People are our primary influence in the living organism for which we design. We consider how people touch, feel, hear, see, What stimulates movement, imagination, social interaction? Our work stirs the intellect, yet engages dreams, aspirations, memories, and the past. We consider the nature of places both natural and human-made. We walk the land to feel its tilt and warp, its geologic history, and evidence of human touch. We consider the nature of light and the prevailing wind, the consequences of rain and snow, a place's attitude, and a place's spirit. We inquire into the nature of materials, stone, wood, concrete, metal, glass, fabric, and aspire to use just what's necessary to match them to the task at hand. We weigh each material's environmental impact and their life cycle and how they will wear and age. Set on a hillside above Frank Lloyd Wright's Fallingwater, High Meadow serves as a home base for those studying in residence. It seeks to connect its inhabitants to its place, the field and forest, hills and sky, and critically Wright's masterpiece in the valley below, seen here in the lower left of the map, High Meadow in the upper right. At a smaller scale, the complex works as an interconnected organism that provides places for exploration, study, work, solitude, and gathering. Weaving together connections to the land and between its residents, the project strives to foster a respect and sensitivity to the natural world. High Meadow looked to conserve the resources that were already present on site, leveraging an existing detached garage and split-level cabin to anchor the studio and dwelling programs, respectively. Tired and well-worn, these existing structures were given new life, made more accessible, and their envelopes bolstered. Inviting people into the High Meadow dwellings is the humble gesture of a sloped wooden deck that draws up from the forest floor and welcomes people to inhabit the main level of the existing cabin and the new screened porch and sleeping units. Raised on a nimble network of columns, the natural patterns of hydrology on the site were maintained, so rain is able to freely flow under the new construction. It also provides a privileged perch for the inhabitants to experience the natural world while fostering a sensitivity to the land and how we touch it. A wood screen wall weaves together the old and new elements of the building. The tapestry is constructed of non-native trees harvested and milled on site. Through selective cuts, the rough sawn boards were divided into 4 profiles, providing rich variegation through an efficiency of means and stewardship of material. Starting as a dense weft and slowly fraying into the meadow, the slats provide a variegation of light, color, and texture, serving as an extension of the forest edge, drawing you to the meadow while providing you with curated views back to the wooded understory. An intimate place to sleep and study, a meandering walkway with places to sit and draw, an airy screened porch to gather and eat, knowing the pattern, movement, and proclivities of people, and creating places to connect them to their natural surroundings at a range of scales makes for rich community. Simple and open, the adaptability of the central screened porch allows it to serve as a place for dining, lectures, critiques, and talking into the evening. This space is unconditioned, like most of the facility, and it reduces the size of mechanical systems and energy demands while availing it to the breezes, smells, sounds of the meadow and forest. Things that are sustainable endure. They last, not just for this generation, but for generations to come. Selecting a simple palette of modest but resilient materials helps to ensure the long-term sustainability of this place and the important programming that it houses. Articulated angle shrouds at each sleeping unit helps capture cool breezes coming up from the valley floor while shielding those within from the summer sun. Responsive to the needs of people, the shrouds also help to frame views and provide privacy for those personal spaces. In the studio, as in the dwellings, the work is always seeking to orient and raise awareness of the inhabitant to the world around them. The shop area frames a duplex of views to the small orchard and forest beyond. Shaping and milling wood here is done with the raw resources quietly on display. Minimizing the need for artificial lighting, the studio uses simple polycarbonate panels to wash sunlight in from above and allows students to connect to the seasonal colors around them, attuned to the rhythm of the seasons in southwestern Pennsylvania. The studio is nestled into the woods, ever cognizant of its needs to coexist within the delicate ecosystem it inhabits, while humbly providing shelter. We are committed to creating places like High Meadow that invoke purpose. Well-loved places are well cared for, and well cared for places endure the rigors of time. As students work into the night, the studio glows as a lantern, guiding those coming and going through the dark forest. But our buildings must also guide figuratively, setting standards for sustainable practice and guiding the next generation to greater levels of stewardship as they live, work, learn, and grow within our built environment. We do so by being alive to the organic patterns or natures of people, places, and the ways we make things. It will lead us to greater sustainability, but it will also provide us with the opportunity to make a richer, more powerful, and evocative architecture.
Thank you, Bill. What a delightful presentation. I was thinking of your mentor and colleague, Peter, and his descriptions of architecture as heading from here to there, and the experiences in between, and the beautiful reference to sustainability as it relates to buildings that people love, that will endure the test of time. Wonderful. We sure appreciate it, Bill. Thank you so much. Our next presenter is Blake Kem. And Blake is a recent graduate of Miami University and Master of Architecture student at Columbia University GSAP. He's been employed at Cohn Pedersen Fox in New York since 2018, working on large-scale urban-focused projects in New York, Boston, and San Francisco. Blake's work is focused primarily on material research, placemaking, and design methodology embedded in craft. During the fall of 2018, as a member of the Miami University Westcott Design Build Studio, he worked collaboratively with the Westcott Center for Architecture and Design on a design proposed for the Visitor Center at Frank Lloyd Wright's Westcott House in Springfield, Ohio. Welcome, Blake.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Justin, for the invitation, as well as the introduction. Looking forward to adding yet another thread to this discussion on sustainable organic architecture. One of the most important and often overlooked threads of contemporary sustainable design originates from research that shows that around 80% of energy associated with building today is directly linked to the sourcing and maintenance of building materials, extraction, transportation, processing, production, demolition, disposal, what architects and others like to call buildings embodied energy. The last 20% of which is reserved for a building's operational energy. With this in mind, the research for this project followed the material story of terracotta at a selected site in the financial district of Lower Manhattan. The site being the 1907 Gothic high-rise skyscraper Liberty Tower, an important antecedent to the famous Woolworth building, built just years later. The research was furthered by questioning the ethics of modern building culture, specifically the ways in which architecture can be seen as endless accumulations of embodied energy material on a singular site over time, which began to reposition existing materials as wonderful opportunities for reuse, attempting to solve our contemporary energy sourcing issues. Documentation, of course, played a pivotal role, as always, in situating the building within its larger urban context, allowing considerations for material and its reuse to become embedded to the relationship of the events of the street, and maybe most importantly, its relationship to the public collective. You can see the building rendered here within its main intersection. Drawing and representation in this series of images was crucial in physically manifesting the sort of hidden effects of building and embodied energy as templates for equitable and sustainable design. Drawing is here represented in these images as a first step towards understanding the complex with the complex effects, flows, and feedback loops of the project. The analysis ended in cataloging Liberty Tower's terracotta cladding components from the most reproducible to the most unique pieces, as you can see on the left, precipitating one of the defining critiques and questions of the project. Could we be more expressive with a material that allows for so much flexibility and sculptural quality? Speak more honestly to the kind of inherent qualities of the material. And from the beginning, the project always desired to be defined by a process relating back to this material story, or i.e. the material process, and by a series of material developments which allowed the energy embedded in the material to be recycled and reused to create a new architectural intervention. It sets a precedent for future sustainable design in the city. Terracotta from the building's exterior is removed, rotated, and stacked into a much more dynamic poche on the building's interior. And then the last stage, as you saw in the previous image, on the building's exterior, quantifies a structural form which speaks most honestly and clearly to the ability of terracotta to be recasted and molded. Realizing the diagram, the plan, and program of this concept was first analyzed, as you can see here, in color block form, exploring the mediation between interior and exterior space, seeking to envision a synergy, yet distinction amongst the layers of the urban fabric. And in essence, the program for the building becomes a holistic response to our soon-to-be post-COVID environment. Attached directly to the building, the proposed Center for Civil Discourse, its construction and ownership formulated by 3 local debate and discourse organizations, reinforces and incentivizes at every corner the social and human love for informal interactions. The first floor, as you can see here, primarily becomes a service floor for the intervention, housing the dining area, the cafe, the storage functions of the center, while the second and third floors are much more flexible and represent the primary programming of the building, with large and small lecture halls wrapping around the exterior, which are complemented by intimate, informal meeting spaces and the darker cave-like poche. These spaces are supposed to facilitate the lost social encounters that were taken from us or eradicated from our lives when the pandemic struck the earth. From a more holistic vision, the different interventions throughout the city are imagined as a sort of connected circuitry, as you can see in the section to the right, that reclaim the vacant offices and apartments from the pandemic and return them to public programs for the betterment of the collective's experience of Broadway, to kind of break down the barriers that we see vertically throughout the city. The expressive structure of the exterior spaces provides ample room and programming for business lunches, shared office spaces, and informal meetings during the weekday, while formal lectures and scheduled meetings are imagined in these spaces during weeknights and weekends. You can kind of imagine as this kind of wholly inclusive space for local residents and local organizations. Lecture overflows, unexpected encounters, and meetings after the meeting occur into those organic interior spaces that wrap around the formal program spaces. Of course, in the spirit of Wright, the connections become a crucial design challenge and a moment to explore the transition between these different stages that I've laid out between terracotta's reuse and its recasting. And it's sort of distinguishing them as the disparate stages of development and kind of showing how embodied energy is being reused in the process. The series of details explicates the physical transition done by the space owners, the organizations themselves, from flat cladding removed from the building area where the intervention occurs and rotated to form the much more expressive, ephemeral, and organic poche on the building's interior. This is stages 1 to 2. And then the second transition from stages 2 to 3 proclaims a much more expressive and honest detailing of terracotta, as I mentioned, with the inherent qualities of the material becoming expressed in the building's sweeping arches of its formal spaces. The realization of these moments are particularly important for the owners who will be working in conjunction with local craftspeople and designers, terracotta producers and suppliers to explore the unexpected and informal possibilities as a method of community building and placemaking. Once again, and maybe most importantly, the craft and design, molding, and assembly is expressed in this ephemeral state of architecture and assist in situating the fundamental elements of organic architecture within the purview of sustainable design. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake. Well, such a fantastic presentation, a great range from embodied energy to the art of joinings. I really appreciate the passion. Wonderful project. Thank you so much. Our next presenter is Mary Rogero, and Mary's a graduate of Wright State University and Miami University, practicing architect and chair of the Department of Architecture and Interior Design at Miami. Her research focuses on passive house design and construction based on the principles of fair share and employed through the methodologies of conservation first. She's a certified passive house consultant and certified passive house builder. Mary teaches the CPHC curriculum at Miami, which is currently one of 5 universities in the country to offer the training to students. She's been a part of Miami University's faculty team for the Department of Energy's Race to Zero and Solar Decathlon design challenges that has guided Miami students to win 7 awards over the last 4 years, including the grand winner in residential housing for 2020. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Justin. And it's really nice to share this stage here with so many wonderful graduates of our program as well. So thank you. The focus of my presentation is really about the intersection of practice and teaching, and in particular, net zero and energy plus. So you might never guess by looking at this house that it has 14-inch super insulated walls, 2 small mini splits, 1 per floor, that heat and cool the entire 1,800 square foot house and uses about 75% less energy than its neighbors. The house has plenty of triple pane windows that help reduce the heat loss, that can be opened for a breeze and when the air is no longer thick with mayflies, or on a cool evening to night flush the house. It provides views of the lake from every location in the house, including when soaking in the tub. So while this house may look somewhat normal, it requires that the designer have a very different body of knowledge and tools so that we don't inadvertently create moisture or mold problems on the pathway to greater energy efficiency. When we draw building plans, it's typical that we use 2 lines with an empty space between or pochade. Our drawing conventions don't represent the energetic exchange in materials as influenced by temperature, moisture, light, and wind. And while we usually design for the body, we don't necessarily design with the body, understanding it as its own energetic heat source and the role it plays in the performance of a building. The methodology that I teach students is passive building, and the protocols developed by FIA, so the Passive House Institute US. This protocol is a climate-based solution that considers multiple strategies, many that I'm sure you're all familiar with, but it's more than that. It's about having a much deeper understanding about the relationship of these components to the whole. Passive building is different than passive solar. It's about optimizing the building envelope in order to reduce the energy that we need to produce thermal comfort. So by having better performing envelope through air tightness and insulation, we can reduce the size of the mechanical system, and thus internal gains and moisture have much greater impact on our heating and cooling system and the needs and the viability of the structure itself. So we teach this through a variety of different formats. John mentioned the CPHC certification program, but we also teach studio using these methodologies. This is a commercial project developed by our students for a social service agency. I think this methodology is an effective solution for housing and commercial, but particularly effective for multifamily housing projects and being adopted by many affordable housing agencies across the US. Energy security and affordability for low-income housing is an important factor for the social justice implications of sustainability. The work that we do in Passive House has helped support our student teams. For those who, for the past 4 years, we've participated in the Department of Energy Race to Zero and have had great success. That work does not happen by me alone. It's a a team of people, including John Becker as the main studio instructor for the last 2 years, Mary Ben Bonham, and many support staff and host of industry partners. Our 2020 grand prize project was a net zero affordable housing development called Peace Village in the Over the Rhine neighborhood of Cincinnati, Ohio, an area that experienced widespread gentrification resulting in increased homelessness and the forced exodus of long-term community residents. The part of the project also included a small multifamily team that created the Net Zero Grow or Greater Residential Opportunity, 47 unit mixed use housing with ground floor public laundry and community spaces where education and support could be provided to the residents. Both were done in partnership with the Over the Rhine Community Housing Agency. Our 2019 competition entry also collated 2 projects on adjacent sites, an elementary school, Sowing Seeds Academy, and an affordable housing, attached affordable housing project. And between these 2 net zero projects was a pollinator prairie that provided both an education opportunity for the school and a passive recreation space for the residents. Here we see one of the images of the attached housing, which Blake Kim was actually a part of. And it creates these larger scale kind of projects, creates a really good opportunity for us to deal with the site in terms of regenerative processes and looking at biological solutions for water and water runoff. Our 2018 project was a small multifamily housing project that provided much needed veteran housing in Chillicothe, Ohio, also providing social and rehabilitation spaces for residents. There's a number of faculty members across the US that are also engaged in the teaching of passive house practices and protocols. And I want to take a minute to pay tribute to some of their work, because not only are they doing great work, but they've helped us to create a stronger network and supportive faculty who are working like this. This is a project by teacher, architect, builder Tim McDonald in North Liberty neighborhood of Philadelphia called The Battery. In which he also uses electric cars to help kind of support that whole agenda. This is also the work of Robert Arlt of South Dakota State University and Charles McBride, formerly at South Dakota, now at University of Texas. This is a design build project for students based on an initiative that was provided by the Governor's Office of Economic Development. It's won numerous awards. Also, numerous award winner Shelley Potter from the Prairie View, Texas A&M, who started first teaching the CPH curriculum and whose team won the grand prize in the Solar Decathlon in 2018. This won an AIA Code Award, and Shelley's getting ready they're going to start production on their first fly flat house. Lastly, I want to share a project of mine in Oxford, Ohio that my clients have graciously allowed me to use as a regular demonstration house for my students. The house the students can always tell the quality of the air on the inside, how fresh it is and how comfortable it is. And I really enjoyed that the client during the wintertime always sends me emails telling me that he still hasn't turned on the heater yet. So the air feels so fresh inside, and the views and the landscape, just an incredible space to be, especially when he's locked in during coronavirus. I want to leave you with one final image of the entryway to the Schreider house, where the owner had his sons produce a modern day version of preserving their child's handprints on the panel before the corten had oxidized. Whenever I see this image, I'm not only struck by its tender and poetic presence, it reminds me that as designer and as humans, it's important to understand that we leave our mark on the world and how we leave our mark on the world. Thank you.
Mary, thank you. Again, strong presentation. And I really appreciate, again, the intersections so carefully constructed between teaching and practice and the notion of designing with the body. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Malika Kirkling. And Malika is a graduate of Miami and Columbia and is a practicing architect at the Miller Hall Partnership in Seattle, Washington. Her design and research have focused on large sustainable infrastructure projects involving extensive systems coordination, urban design, and cultural and social systems integration. Malika has served on the Seattle AIA Board of Directors, is active as a design critic at the University of Washington, and is a program advisor to the Miller Hall Open Studio program that explores architecture with underrepresented Seattle youth. Welcome, Malika.
Thanks so much, John. Thank you, Justin. And it's great to be here. And thanks for the challenge opportunity to share some ideas here on the topic. A caution. We are at play in architectural theory. Articulation of one, the critical detail, is a supposition and an invitation to look beyond our work at its impact as an extension and evolution of the principles of organicism. But first, who are we? This is not meant as an existential question, but it connects us to where we have been and where we might go. Bob and Dave were friends. They found great purpose serving in the Peace Corps, and they built a practice inspired by the inherent strength of sustainability by nature and necessity. They created the culture of us. And this is us, Miller Hall, a 44-year-old family who holds on to its alumni like kin. Individual parts that make a whole, not unlike details, and in between the lines, this is ultimately a story about our evolution beyond our influences. So what is the critical detail? In Dave's conception, it is critical, provocative, iconic, and ultimate. Even the smallest architectural element that can transform an ordinary building into an extraordinary one. Units working in unison to articulate concept and become the project. When we connect attention to detail and the intent to lead design by tectonic expression, with the knowledge that to be truly sustainable and have a positive and regenerative impact on human beings and natural systems, as is the aim of the Living Building Challenge, that creates clarity. But this is also about the modernist complications of buildings and the words that architects use surrounding them, when perhaps we might best be served by simply experiencing them quietly. Adrian Forti does well to help us understand what architects mean when they speak. Still, we need to know Vitruvius's 10 books, Sullivan's Form Follows Function, Wright's subversion that form and function are one, and if I can play two, because form follows function, function articulates form, and therefore form and function are one. And one is the essence of organicism. Then we can appreciate with quiet clarity the prominent protrusion of the bullet center's irresistible stare, enticing us to comfortably climb and to conserve the energy often devoted to non-essential trips in an elevator. And in this simple functional act, we complete the essential purpose of the detail, to encourage mindful behavior and to be rewarded for our efforts along the way, to create and support regenerative systems and become a human component of the detail and system. Ultimately, it could be said that it's simply a stair. Its performance and articulation is familiar and not complex, but we hope there is beauty, purpose, and a signature that resonates in its nuance. At times, the idea of one in detailing is manifest in an unexpected series of repeating scales, which echo programmatic, visual, and conceptual relationships, creating and reinforcing a broader, iconic concept of detailing. At Fisherman's Terminal, the intersection of Seattle's tech economy and its fisheries and maritime industrial belt creates an opportunity for the integration and articulation of form and function, reflective of both the history and promise of these hybrid industries. A tech incubator gantry over multiple industrial warehouses distributes at their intersections the shared infrastructure of both environmental and human-based systems, both a visual concept and actual organizing principle that reflects a newly envisioned industrial working order and future for the port. Within the context of organicism and the LBC, the critical detail has the power to provoke our preconceptions about what even constitutes a detail. What is planned, articulated, constructed? Can you truly detail the organic? What life can a detail have beyond its construction? Or what life can it literally provide? A bridge across the stream becomes a backdrop to an unexpectedly placed nursing log, carefully prepared to provide sustenance within a mycological foraging forest, open to all neighbors and passersby. At Loom House, the strength of landscape architecture was used as a threshold to enhance and support regenerative relationship to our environment and to substantively reconnect architecture to landscape. In design, we often begin with a knowledge of the literal enormity of constraints. And with experience, those constraints can become elevated and integral to concept. Such is the covered porch at Candida, an ultimate critical detail. It generates 455 megawatt hours per year, collects 50,000 gallons of rainwater, and is a cool place of prospect and refuge for the community. It is essential to the overall project's ability to do what founder Diana Blank calls real good rather than just less harm. Defined by site, the proximity and program of the architecture, and the sheer capacity of the canopy, the PV arrays of our sustainable projects are a big self-conscious deal. The array is not going away. Looking back now towards Seattle and Bullitt from Loom House, I'll end on Wright's own expectations. As for the future, the work shall grow more truly simple, more expressive with fewer lines, fewer forms, more articulate with less labor, more plastic, more fluent, although more coherent, more organic. Thank you.
Wonderful, Malika. Such an inspiring presentation on the critical detail as you helped us navigate modernist complication through these really lyrical, quiet responses. Thank you again so much. Our next presenter and our sixth panelist is Wendell Burnett. And Wendell's a self-taught architect who served as an apprentice at Frank Lloyd Wright's Taliesin West and pursued an 11-year association with the Will Bruder Studio. Based in Phoenix, his international practice and award-winning body of work is concerned with space, light, context, and community. Wendell's work has been recently published in his captivating monograph, Dialogues in Space. Among his many prestigious awards, Wendell received the Academy in Architecture Award from the Academy of Arts and Letters in New York. A professor of practice at Arizona State University, Wendell also teaches and lectures widely, nationally and internationally. Welcome, Wendell.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Justin. It's an honor to be part of this symposium and to be with these great architects. So I'm going to start by just walking through 25 years of our work. This is a seminal work, my residence that I designed and built and have been living in now just over 25 years. And I'm going to be sharing specific details of this, of our work over 25 years. You drive into this house, it extrudes up a scar that existed on the site. We only touched the house, the land where the house was, where the land was previously disturbed. The monoliths that you see that kind of create this man-made canyon are a new product by the masonry company here, Superlight. You'll notice there are no end cells, so it's a skeletal frame of face shells that are post-tension with only a 2/3 height middle cell that achieves the compression, pumped with foam, achieving an R20 wall. So it's a single stroke solution, structure, thermal envelope, exterior, interior finish. I was building this at the same time that I was finishing this work with my mentor, Will Bruder, where I served as co-designer, project, and field architect. This building is shaded from the east and west sun, open to the north and south, and to the traffic up and down the main street of the city. This is a project that I started my practice with, the Dialogue House. It's a dialogue between two elemental volumes, the living room on the left, and just out of the image on the right, you descend into a pool. So it's an idea of resort living. You put a towel over your shoulder and you go for a swim. Again, masonry construction, and then conventional wood frame stucco, finished with a plaster that creates a dialogue with the desert varnish of the Phoenix Mountains behind. And the public project that I did with Gould Evans, which is in a public park on the west side of Phoenix. It's a multi-generational community center on the left and a public library on the right. This is, I think, a response to environmental design by looking at, which we always do, but was very important in this project, is looking at the assets of the existing site. In this case, a ball field and a park that was supposed to be paved. So the first act was to go for a parking variance and to reduce the parking from 600 plus cars to 250 cars, associating the library with the corner park, a community center with the field and the pool. It's a reverse lantern that gauges one of the phenomenal aspects of our place, which is the range of light, the colored air. So mill finish stainless steel, 40% less energy to produce, the rawest form of the material, big box construction that promotes a dialogue between the exercise of the body, in the case of the community center, and the exercise of the mind in the library. This is the busiest community center and the busiest branch library in the city of Phoenix Parks and Library System. Another project is the Field House, which is south-facing on a cornfield in upstate Wisconsin. It's actually in the called the Grand Chute. It's one of the last retreating glaciers in North America that created the thumb of Wisconsin. And so it's this kind of glacial light form that is set against the existing fence row and the protecting from the northwest winter winds that are very cold in this region, and opens to the south, but also a little warm light pumping out of the east. This is our proposal that we were honored to be invited as part of the Fallingwater Cottages competition that Bill presented earlier. Our concept was looking at the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy's goal of getting rid of the monoculture of spruce. And so our idea was to fell that monoculture, allow them to grow the forest back that's more native, and use that as an industry with the mills along Mill Run to do a solid timber construction. Again, single stroke solution, structure, thermal envelope, exterior, interior finish. Another project in the desert. This on the left you see is a project you can barely find. It's receding into the floor of the desert. And then you discover the delicacy of the Sonoran Desert, the lushest desert in the world, by entering through this vessel, this kind of this form that's cracked open, and corrals a piece of the Arizona sky, preserves these volcanic rocks in the middle, and endow a courtyard space, a mesquite boss that shades the glass during the summer and drops its leaves in the winter. So for us, it's about experience. In this house, the Hidden Valley Desert House, we have a dispersed core plan sitting on a plinth. The dispersed core reduces the glass to mass ratio to 30%, and at the same time, creating a kind of pinwheeled views to the landscape. Also, the canopy that sits on top of that dispersed core incorporates photovoltaic for a net zero house. It also shades not only the interior space, but fully programmed exterior space that's equal in square footage. So indoor, outdoor living, most times the windows are open. And the last project, the Amangiri Resort, which recedes into its landscape as a mass ruin, akin to the canyon landscape that we're designing. Cast in place concrete that utilize local fines, aggregates, recycled fly ash from the nearby power plant. And lastly, just to talk about the body, that sustainability, in my view, is first and foremost good design that touches the hearts and souls of the people, community, and places that it serves. Direct experience of places continue to bring delight to our hearts and souls and teach us that time is on the side of good building and good placemaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendell. A wonderful presentation. And I really appreciate the overarching theme of dialogue, the rich patterns of engagement of your projects with their settings. And for totally self-serving reasons, I've used your projects multiple times as case studies in my modern vernacular course. So thank you for that as well. Wonderful presentations. At this point, I'm going to turn our symposium over to Justin, who's going to walk us through some of the summary comments. We have Stefan scheduled for a 5-minute recap, and then each of the panelists is asked to make a brief 2-minute statement. So with that, Justin, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, John. And just thank you to all of the speakers. Truly poetic, engaging presentations, really, really beautiful and elegant solutions to the issues that we face today as we try and think more sustainably. And as John mentioned earlier, for the audience, we're hoping that this is just a prequel. This is our web-based version of what we hope post-pandemic can be an in-person symposium at Fallingwater. So please keep an eye out. We hope to invite all of these speakers back in the future at Fallingwater so we can enjoy new dialogues about these topics in the near future. But yeah, we just would love for all of the speakers to just kind of briefly summarize today for our audience. And Stefan, I'll invite you first.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting for me to see all the different approaches, how you approach this, and to see the work you are doing and you have done to catch up from Europe with my American colleagues. I like the approaches. I like very much the wide variety of approaches and of presentations of work done, of future work, of concepts, possibilities. Hey, Blake, I like the poster behind you. And no, it was a very, very interesting for me. And it's a beautiful work, very impressive work. And seeing all this engagement and work, I have the feeling we'll find a way to make things better together. Now I am close to retirement, so it's more up to you guys. But still, it's very exciting to see the different paths, the different approaches, and the work in all these different climate zones. United States is more difficult than Germany. We have 2 climate zones. You have 84 or something like that, if I recall correctly. So yeah, thank you very much. It was very inspiring also for me to see all the approaches. And Let's hope we get the chance to develop further. Thanks.
Thank you, Stefan. Kevin, could I invite you next?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Sure. No, it was been a lovely sort of break in the day, and I guess I would say, architecture is just fundamentally an optimistic adventure. It's like, I don't think one could be an architect without imagining a kind of an optimistic future. And it was a real pleasure to hear 7 different takes on what that optimistic future might be. I mean, certainly it's an extraordinary group you brought together, people I've admired for a long time, and work that's extraordinary. For me, it's really lovely to hear the kind of insights and the kind of ways in which the sort of broad spectrum of approaches that people are taking towards sustainability, certainly rooted in Frank Lloyd Wright's legacy, but that they're encompassing the poetry of a place, the human occupation, the possibilities of form, and all wrapped up with a kind of technical aplomb that is just laudable. So I just I'm happy to be at an event that is so wrapped up in a kind of positive view of what could happen, and with such amazing possibilities. So thanks for including me.
Thank you, Kevin. Bill.
Yes. The varied responses to this question, I think, are striking, but I think actually listening to the different presenters, the common threads that kind of strung things together, that although we are rigorously looking and pursuing technical solutions to the problems and challenges that we face, I think oftentimes leaning into some of the ephemeral and emotional elements that undergird these decisions are really what's critical. Malika talking about the joy and treat of a material detail. Wendell, the just beauty of finding just the right element that captures all those technical challenges and one material solution. The ways in which Stefan talked about using wood in such new and inventive ways. I think those are the things that excite me. I also know Kevin talked about and it might have been before we went live, the joy of being an architect is getting to have these wonderful types of interactions, which we're all longing for. And so I think as we look at this in the context of sustainability and rights work, I think, again, I would echo that it gives me a sense of optimism that we are moving towards a better future in these things, and an excitement for when we can collaborate together more personally to bring about these changes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. That's wonderful. Blake.
Yeah, I think a lot of my thinking about the symposium and what we've heard today kind of goes in line with what Kevin was mentioning about the sort of optimism of architecture and how we look at the future. Because I think when it comes to energy and sustainable design, we're faced with some of the most interesting challenges, some of the most amazing challenges. And when it comes to how to solve some of these issues, I think the kind of cohort of work that we've seen today shows the sort of depth or the sort of connection between some of the technical aspects of research, energy, how we look at buildings to solve some of these issues, and then some of the more artistic qualities of experience, as Wendell mentioned in his work, and the sort of placemaking that we're creating with programming of our buildings, of relationships to site, to nature, to detailing, to artistic expression in general. I think there's really this sort of interesting and important connection between those two kind of artistic and technical challenges when it comes to sustainable design.
Thanks, Blake. Mary.
Yeah, thank you. Really interesting for me. my original career trajectory was in sculpture. And I moved from there into architecture, where for the first time I had to learn how to draw with a ruler. And all my artist friends were like, oh my gosh, you're drawing with a ruler. I went from there to the trajectory that I'm on now, where I'm suddenly in spreadsheets and thermal bridge calculations, like so far from where I originally thought I was going to go. And I'm reminded of an experience that I had as a graduate student at Miami, when a group of us went to a early sustainability conference in like the late 80s. And after a particularly riveting presentation on dust mites, British architect William Alsop stood up, and the first 3 words he said was, "Where's the poetry?" And I've always been struck by that, particularly now as I find the focus of my work getting more towards social justice issues, affordable housing issues, but reminding myself that there still needs to be poetry in all of this. And I saw that in everybody's work. And I think we always need to be reminded of that there are those, it's a multi-dimensional kind of approach that we need to take to sustainability. And yeah, thank you for all of those additional sort of touches that remind me get me back to that. Where's the poetry? Thank you.
Away from spreadsheets and back to poetry. Malika.
Thanks. Yes, where's the poetry? That really resonates with me. I think, first, thanks for the opportunity to engage on this subject again. I think for me, sustainable organicism, just the title was incredibly complex of a challenge, because when I think about sustainability, I think about how we've gone from these kind of passive systems approaches, and now, because of the real challenge, there's real work to be done to make our buildings, our built environment, sort of meet the challenge. We've gone into this more active systems kind of world, and I've felt for many years now that it's become like I'm clawing at things. I can't keep up with the science and the technology, and I think it is important to kind of reflect back on things like organicism, which to me is a complement, a theoretical complement to what we're talking about when we talk about sustainability. So to me, the challenge of the task was to think about theory and practice. And so I think I kind of, there are many people in Miller Hall who are kind of our sustainability gurus, who can kind of go through each one of these projects, which were all living building challenge projects, and have an immense amount of work to do. They could run you through all of the kind of super impressive numbers and things. But I think one thing that I'm excited about in terms of our work is the ability for each and every person in the practice to be able to tell the story of all of these projects. And so I hope I was able to do that today. And I don't want to kind of diminish the seriousness of the real imperative that buildings need to go beyond zero. They need to be regenerative at this point. There's a lot of work to do, and I hope that everything that each one of us has done has provided inspiration and information to each other and also the attendees and in that effort, and that we can all find our place either on the range of theory or practice and experience. I think it's important to kind of, as I said in the presentation, take a step back from the words that kind of complicate things and just go and experience these places, and to really, as a human being, make yourself a part of the solutions that these buildings are after. So thanks again.
Wonderful comments. Yeah. And Wendell.
It's an honor, and I really enjoyed all the presentations. I think it's I do agree that architects, we have to be eternal optimists, and I think what we practice is a social art. It's about connecting people. It's about bringing people together. It's about connecting us to our place in the world. And I you know, I appreciate all the projects that I almost would redefine the symposium as kind of rediscovering old conceptions of sustainability and organic architecture, which to me is just good building, good placemaking, but in the context of our time and rising to the challenges of our time. And I think it's paying attention to spreadsheets and how buildings perform. It's paying attention to our clients and how the buildings need to work. And I think also paying attention to beauty and to emotion, and that what we practice is an emotional art. We are trying to make connections with each other, with people. I feel like a lot of it is, in my view, is all a given. It's what we do as architects. And yet, I think the most important thing is that we build buildings that, whether it's a house or a public building, it's something that people cherish, that there's a relationship that is created between a community and its buildings, between an individual or a family and their house. And that's what architecture is about, in my view. And yet, it's one of my favorite books is Bernard Radowski's book, Architecture Without Architects, Architecture Without a Pedigree. And I think there's a lot of lessons that we look to that are very ancient, that goes to human nature. Why do we need shelter? We need cities. We need to congregate. We need to connect. And I think Wright, and I really would love to know more, John. I feel as a professor, what I know about Frank Lloyd Wright is that he built in all scales for all people. He showed that architecture can happen anywhere for anybody and for any budget. And the fact that the building behind you, Justin, that you're kind of in charge of this gift to the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy and what it has to teach. It was one of the wealthiest people in America at the time. But at the same time, Wright was doing his first Usonian house, which was for the average person for $5,000 at that time. And it's always struck me, something I think people don't talk about with Frank Lloyd Wright is the material innovation. He was always inventing. I think he's an early proponent of not only architecture that's in harmony with nature, but critical regionalism, architecture that's resonant with the place, the history of place. And also, he never became such a rock star that, he didn't do the smallest projects. So, I think there's just so much in the universities that Wright could teach. I don't think Wright is taught enough in the context of our universities. So I admire, John, that you've put this together, and I think there should be more of this. Thank you.
thanks to you, Wendell, and to Justin, and to all our panelists. Justin, have you been looking at the chat and the Q&A? Is there?
Yeah, and I just wanted to put out there that we are, technically out of time, but if attendees would like to stay on and hear some responses to a few of the questions that have been posed, please do, and we'll stay on for maybe about another 10 minutes and field some of those questions. One that came up after some comments about architecture and being hopeful and optimistic, getting out of the situation that we're currently in with the pandemic, with political divisiveness. Do any of you see ways to balance sustainability with societal changes that are responding to those big picture world issues that we're all facing right now? And I know Blake touched on it a little bit with his idea, but not to pick on Blake, but does anybody have any responses to that? Heavy question.
Can you repeat the question?
So with architecture's optimism, how do we navigate past the pandemic and all the political divisiveness in the world? Like Wendell was saying, how do we bring people back together?
One thing I'll touch on. I think the one thing we can do is focus on creating real experiences and real value, and maybe something that balances the I think the core issue on the political side is all these kind of disinformation. Like, how do we focus on what's real? We can only do so much as architects, but I think creating real places, real experiences that are sincere, that solve problems, the problems that we have some part to play in, and that's what we give an alternative to, I don't know, alternative facts or alternative reality, or show that we're truly blessed to live on this planet, and it's a special place, and we're in a special time, and I feel, connecting to that in ways that compete with the alternatives, which are this kind of, I don't know, the internet and all this is good, but to me, it's somewhat just getting back to the basics, or remembering the basics of how we do interact with each other, and that we can talk to one another. And I don't know, we create reasons to get out of our own echo chambers.
That's great, Wendell. Stefan, you had your hand up.
One thing is, the pandemic is I would say a change accelerator more than it's a change cause. A lot of developments we have seen lately were already on the horizon developed. The way we work, the way we live, the way we communicate, the way politicians fuck up things, it was all developing and was just speeded up. We have also our problems here in Europe. You are not alone with your political problems. But what I think is, there are certain events in our history, in mankind's history, and we are probably a very fortunate two generations now here on the screen. We have not really experienced personally devastating wars. They were always somewhere else, not in our home countries. We didn't experience famines. We didn't experience the plague. We didn't experience all this kind of thing. And now we get a tiny bit of the plague right now, which disturbs society, and it actually disturbs our social contact. So we learn to value our social contacts more again, how important they are, how difficult it is to be really nailed down at one place, to be at one place. So I see it difficult, but I also see some positive aspects in it, that we actually sort of have the chance to reconsider a lot of things we totally took for granted. I'm grown up thinking democracy is a given. I grew up thinking traveling is a given. I grew up thinking friendships over the ocean is a given. And actually, we have to do hard work to maintain all that. And I think that the pandemic taught us a lesson here. Let's hope we learned it. And I'm absolutely convinced we will not get back to late 2019. I think we all learned some lessons here. Also, environment, also with the environment, the way we live and the way we look at friendships on colleagues, and the way actually, and that's very important for architecture, we experience the public realm, because the public realm has been poisoned for us the last year, at least partially over here. The public realm became a dangerous place, and not only because of social unrest and robbers, it became a dangerous place because you had to keep your distance. I mean, today I was walking outside in the snow, and when you pass people, they hold their breath until you have passed. So suddenly a lot of behaviors change. And I see that as a chance that we reappreciate our society, our public realm, and the quality of our public realms. Thank you.
That's great. So an accelerator for change. I like that.
Yeah.
Kevin, you had your hand raised, and then Mary, I think, wants to make a comment.
Sure, well, maybe just briefly then, and I so appreciated what Stefan was just saying, and it's a kind of optimism that I'm on board with, and I hope we take these lessons to heart. I was just going to say, just trying to answer the question, I mean, certainly I think all of us would agree that architecture is involved with these things, but not everything. But one of the things that I feel like was an undercurrent in the whole conversation today was actually quite a sea change from like when I was in school in the late 80s and early 80s, late 80s, for how one conceived of architecture. And I feel like one thing that was very inspiring, and I think is a kind of lesson for answering the question, is thinking that architecture, the point of architecture is not so much about the articulation of an object, that the poetry that Will Alsop was asking for, that Mary brought up, isn't about making a more beautiful thing, but actually in making a kind of performative thing, something where the architecture is, the building is not the kind of artifact to be admired, but actually something that might be, as I said in my talk, more like a prime canvas for social occasion, for life, for engaging things that are larger than the building itself.
Thanks, Kevin. Mary?
Yeah, I just want to, I concur with so much of what's been said here. I want to say that at this last couple of years, and particularly since coronavirus, one of the things that it has really exposed, I mean, we will all come out of this, you know, it's been an inconvenience. You know, we will have our reintegration back with family and friends and social spaces, but it's also exposed and enhanced even some bigger problems of gross inequities within our society. So while we are adapting and we will move forward with some of the old and some of the new, there are many who didn't really have the old and they're not going to have access to the new. And I think that it's been brought to light even more. It's been kind of in our face these last few years, and particularly since this last year. And I hope that we can, as part of all of this, begin to address and integrate more people into these kinds of spaces, and assure a social equity within design and within architecture and with participation and our society as a whole. So.
Thank you, Mary. And I think we'll go ahead and stop there. We've really appreciate, again, the comments and participation of all of our speakers today. John, any other comments that you would like to make? Thank you to everyone that attended from all over the world again. John?
I'd simply like to thank all of our panelists. You inspired me and continue to inspire me. And I count you as colleagues and friends, but I am inspired by your place in the world, by the place that you've carved out for yourselves that you've shared with the rest of us. And I truly treasure it. So know that I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in the space that is Fallingwater, in its majesty, in its uniqueness, in its subtlety, in its nuance, in its moment. And so many of these issues that we've talked about are embodied there. And I look forward to sharing them with each and every one of you. And may we be the antigen for change as the world demands of us. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you all. It's been a pleasure. Now I go to sleep.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.